Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show focuses on sharing good news and powering the good in our community. Now here's your host, City Current CEO, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And in this case, you're in for a treat because when you talk about an author, speaker, coach, podcaster, and so much more, here with us we have Marc A. Wolfe, president and founder of Marc A. Wolfe Enterprises. How are you doing?
Jeremy, I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, and we can go in so many fun, cool directions, but let's start for some context. Give us a little bit of your background, because when we talk about the book and the podcasting and the coaching and mentoring, it really flows through your personal story. So give us some of your background.
Yeah, it's an interesting background. A lot of people don't know. You know, I'm from New Jersey originally. I'm now living in Franklin since 2009. But when I was in New Jersey, I started as a freelance photographer, taking pictures of U.S. presidents, supermodels, and NFL teams, and then went and started to become a Apple dealer and was supporting the Macintosh and Apple before there was an iPod, because companies didn't like Mac back then, and they kind of relegated them to the other computers. And now, look, everybody's got an iPhone. So I was doing that in the 90s. And then what I saw through that time was that when you have conversations, people that were into pictures and photography, or people that were doing creative on the Mac, really it was not about the tools, it was just about the freedom to be able to create. And through that, I started to have conversations and then became an executive coach as a consultant and trying to help people understand how to move from ideas to actions. And that's really the background of kind of where I came from. And then, you know, Tennessee's kind of changed everything. It made life a lot easier than living in New Jersey. And that's where I'm at today.
Well, when you talk about identifying and breaking down barriers, the yeah buts, let's go ahead and talk about the book, and then we'll dive into a lot of the fun stuff. And so the book is Yeah, But, Cut Through the Noise to Live, Learn, and Lead Better. And so talk about this playbook, talk about the book, and that will kind of set us up for the conversation ahead.
Yeah, so through my whole career, I've heard people use this phrase that kept coming up. Yeah, but I don't have the time, or yeah, but what's the plan, or yeah, but, and I was like, why do I keep hearing these yeah, buts? It's so much different than a no. A no is definitive. No, I'm not doing it. But a yes, and I won't do it. So hearing that through, even during photography, yeah, but I'm not that famous yet, or yeah, but I didn't. So I was like, is there something to that? Well, that took decades for me to actually figure out there was a book in there. And I really didn't want to write, because I thought about being in 7th grade and how I didn't like writing reports. And I was like, this will be worse than that. Everybody will be grading you with a red pen. So I looked at this and I was like, let me just avoid this as long as possible, until people started coming up and say, hey, didn't you have that idea about that book? I was like, and then strangers were like, didn't you publish a Yeah, But book? And I was like, okay, maybe this is something I'm supposed to do. So I took that time and I started to go and look at what the Yeah, Buts were about. And what I didn't want to do, and that's what I am as a coach, is not reprimand people and be like, you're wrong. I was like, I just want to reflect, this is what I see. And I wanted to take case studies and just be like, you know, Andre Agassi, he had a yeah, but, right? I mean, he did drugs, he had problems, he actually hated tennis, but he was really successful. People don't know these stories. So I put all these stories together to kind of show people perspective about what yeah, but can really be, or what it won't be if you don't get past them.
What's funny and ironic is that you kind of had your own yeah, but, you know, with your own book, right? Like, it's like, oh, maybe I should, yeah, but. So it's like you get to overcome exactly what you're talking about and share that with the world. And I think what's cool is you've identified certain structures. And so when you talk about giving people a toolkit to be able to identify, okay, this is a yeah, but, and then how do I kind of break it down and move into action, because action creates clarity. Talk about, you know, some of the different structures, talk about some of the different yeah, buts, and then how we're able to start kind of pushing forward.
So, you know, Jeremy, that you're right. And I did talk about my yeah, but, that my actual book was a yeah, but, and I was honest about it. Here's the cool thing about this book. I wrote it not about me, it's about the reader. And I know people say that, but I was like, literally, when my editor went through it, they're like, there's nothing about you in here. And I was like, well, it's not about me. They're like, well, you wrote the book. You should probably have something. So I did write a chapter about me was, yeah, but not where I came from, because I grew up poor. So we were on welfare and food stamps, and people that just know you now, just know where you're at. They don't know where you came from. And in New Jersey, people didn't really care about your background as much. They care about it more in the South. And that's nothing against New Jersey, but it was always about business. So I wrote this book and I was like, people don't have the time to read a 202-page book. If you were going to read a book, Mark, you'd want it on Audible. I was like, but until it's on Audible, how about if you just read the intro and then you read the chapters that matter to you, which yeah, but. And then I broke it to 5 sections. There's path-based ones like, yeah, but I don't know where to start. There's time-based ones, yeah, but I don't have time. There's worry-based ones, yeah, but it's not safe. There's demographic-based ones like, yeah, but I'm too young or too old. And then there's perspective, yeah, but I don't feel successful. So there's 5 sections with 3 chapters inside it. And when people started reading it, the early reviewers, they were like, this book it's not a story arc. What it is each individual story with case studies that actually relate to people. And if your but isn't your yeah but, I bet you know somebody or you have a friend who has this yeah but that you could help. So I think that made it easier. And people have loved that. They're like, I wish books were written like this, where I didn't have to take time to read 200 pages. But there are people that read it from cover to cover. So it works as well.
What's cool is I think, from even just my own, interactions day to day, there's so many individuals and businesses that say, I want to get involved in the community. Yeah, but I don't know where to start, right? And so a pathway approach, okay, let's start figuring out, okay, what's the passion, the purpose? What do you want to achieve? What do you believe in? What do you want to fight for? What time can we clear away? What resources? Let's start aligning nonprofits and start creating some volunteer experiences to get to know them. And then, you're on your way. And so really creating that structure to say, okay, if this is the barrier, this is the way to take action. And from a time-based approach, like you said too, when you look at that as a coach's perspective and stepping in and saying, okay, let me identify where the issues are and let's start working toward a solution. Give me kind of one recent, not necessarily a success story, but either something cool you're working on or something that kind of illustrates, let's start identifying the challenge and let's start creating a solutions-based approach.
One of the biggest yeah buts that I hear from everybody, including myself, is yeah, but I don't have time. And that's fair. But it's the great equalizer, because people have more money than me, but they have the exact same amount of time. I was like, okay, but we don't act that way. We act like everybody has a different amount of time. No, it's how you fill your time. Now, so we know that. Okay, how do you make it practical? I called it the 1440 formula, because there's 1440 minutes in a day. And then actually, I have a recent client, and the reason every client is confidential, but this client has posted on LinkedIn about our conversation. So he made it public. And we were talking about, if you wanted to go and relax after a long day and you decide you want to binge watch Netflix or Hulu or anything you want, and the goal of that was to go and unwind. I said, how many times after you're done binging do you ever measure, did that actually help me do what I said it was going to do? You spent 6 hours watching, and at the end, you're like, oh, I feel totally refreshed. It's like my day never happened. Says no one ever, right? So when you start thinking about this, you're like, oh, hold on, I'm doing something, but it's actually not accomplishing what I said I wanted it to do. So this client started to look at what they spent their time on. And they were volunteering and doing things, but they were volunteering and doing so many different things that they actually didn't have time to do things they actually enjoyed. They liked volunteering, they loved doing things, but if you do too much of anything, and you know that, Jeremy, what happens? It starts to own you, and you start to forget and lose your identity. So by just pointing things like this out, this client went and said, I'm going to quit these boards, I'm going to do these other things, I'm going to spend more time with my family. I was like, all because of a conversation about their 1440. And that was one chapter in the book. Imagine when you start going, it's not safe, and you think about things that you think aren't safe, but they actually are. And think about it, Jeremy. How about in people, because they don't do something, and you brought this up, if you don't do something, how many people are getting robbed of the joy or the value you would bring? What happens if City Current wouldn't have taken over Accelerant all those years ago? How many people would have not had the benefit of what you guys are doing if you used yeah buts and it stopped you?
Yeah, and I think as you're talking about it too, just the intention, being intentional, like obviously with your time in this case. And I think, so many conversations around other successful leaders, they say no more than they say yes, right? Like being very protective of their time and their energy. And I think you get bombarded with all these things and you want to say yes, but being intentional and saying, okay, I've got to clear out these time for the mission critical things, for my family, for giving back, but it's got to be, balanced things so that you're not, to your point, putting all your energy in one thing and you're not able to fill your cup. The cup is drained. And if you don't have a full cup, you can't give it to others. The other thing that's interesting is kind of a paradigm shift, which you're seeing this play out, to your point, does it make you feel better?
Mhm.
And so many, especially the youngers now, with alcohol sales going down, they're starting to say, you know what, going to the bar, drinking heavily, that kind of stuff doesn't make me feel better. I'm not productive. It's hurting my health. It's hard. So what's interesting is even from a societal trend, right? Like
Mhm.
people are starting to pay more attention around what do I eat? What do I consume? What do I put in my body? How does it make me feel? How are my, hours spent? And so I think it's a really interesting conversation because when you look at even just social media, the average person, spends a ridiculous amount of time on social media. So once again, being intentional, saying, okay, I'm going to be a little bit on social media, but I'm going to use the rest of my time and free that up for something really powerful for myself. So I love this kind of conversation around just being intentional. And that's so much of success is just being intentional. So carry that into the podcast because you have a podcast, you have a chance to interview, amazing leaders and to share those lessons and experiences. And so talk about the podcast and the focus of the podcast.
So the podcast was another yeah, but for me. I was like, oh, there's so many podcasts out there. Like in one of the chapters, yeah, but somebody already did it. Who doesn't have a podcast? And then if you have a podcast, the younger generation goes, another old guy on a podcast. They don't shouldn't. Well, I looked at it, I was like, I don't really want to do this. And I was like, you know what? Let's do the same theme. Let's make it about the listener. So I interview people because I meet them, just like you, Jeremy, and you meet people and you're like, this person's kind of cool. Like if I wouldn't have met this person, I wouldn't have had this perspective. So I met somebody who was an ex-CIA agent running cyber. Okay, would you like to be interviewed about your yeah buts? Yes. And they talked about, hey, yeah, but I'm too young. And she was a female in the CIA and talking about how they didn't respect her age. Then, because she was there so long, then Dawn wanted to retire her and she didn't want to retire. And they were like, you're too old. So it was interesting. She talked about the perspective. And it was less about the CIA and more about being a woman, ageism, and other things. And she wasn't bashing people as much as it was just interesting to hear how she overcame a yeah, but in a society and a time when people weren't really accepting of certain things. So when you start to interview people on the podcast and you hear about their yeah buts and you hear about somebody that was helping people out of human trafficking and her yeah but is I'm afraid, I'm scared. And I was like, oh, well, it's because you're going to India at 25 to do that. She was like, no, that wasn't the reason. The reason was I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to serve these people well enough. And I'm going, whoa, right? You're thinking, hold on, people are trying to kill you, right? Because you're actually taking away their economy by, no, that wasn't it. I wasn't. And I was like, so we have these presumptions of answers. And then when you start talking to people and they start to unravel some of these things, your perspective shifts. And I get the blessing of being able to interview people, just like you do, when you get to find out things that they want to tell the world and you just didn't know. And now you have this dialogue with them. So the podcast is doing well. It takes a while to get a follower, but just like you got to do a lot of episodes before people really get to see you.
Yeah, well, it's all about consistency, and over
Mhm.
time, you build. If you build it, they will come. And so, give me one, aha moment, one lesson from a guest or from the process of writing the book or your coaching. When you look at something you've learned from someone else and you've been able to internalize that, and it's been valuable, helpful for you, and it could be helpful for others. Give me one lesson learned or a bit of advice.
You don't know who you're going to impact when you do something. So I wrote this book and I had kind of a avatar in my mind. I was like, okay, these are the people I'm going to reach. Half of my clients are females. I was like, they're going to resonate because I want to help women be heard. I'm a girl dad, right? Married to the same woman for a long time. So there's been women all over my life, right? And I was like, okay, this is going to be targeted toward women because of that, but men are going to get the value from it as well. Well, all of a sudden, there's people coming out of the woodwork that weren't the typical target audience that were saying, this spoke to me about when I was 35 or 40 and I was stuck in a position. And I said, yeah, and I brought that into my 50s. I was like, oh. And I've had people reach out that were like, this is fantastic. You should be doing more of this. Can you speak to this group of 20-something-year-olds? Oh, okay. So I think we have an idea why we do something, and then all of a sudden it gets out there, and then people internalize it in a way you did not expect. And that's the part where if I'm stalling from doing something, who should be hearing this, that even if it's been written before, and I talk about this, yeah, it's been done before. There's been millions of books written about history and the military, but now I have a perspective, I have an audience, and you can talk to me, we can actually discuss it, and there's actions about it. Being a coach and a consultant, I don't just throw things out there and go, do you feel better? I was like, do you want help actually overcoming something? So the lessons I'm learning, I'm still learning. And I know you got to continue to give back in a way where you let people receive it and decide to do what they want to with it.
Yeah, and I think, we're all still learning. I mean, any leader strives to learn and continue to get better and improve. And I also think that in many cases, you see someone, especially in a public persona, but you don't realize that everyone struggles with self-doubt and confidence. And, they may seem, you see them in this moment and they're confident and they're, you see the experience that is built up over time. But, everyone, entrepreneurs, you name it, has struggled with confidence. And so when you share those stories and others, especially the younger generation, hears that and says, wow, okay, they were also like this. They also had to break down these barriers and break through the glass ceilings and things like that. It really is empowering, and it gives them the confidence to say, if they can, I can too. And I think that's the part of special, legacies and being able to share and all grow together, is being able to continue these stories, but really more importantly, share these lessons learned so that others can cut down the learning curve and, take it even further and faster. And so carry that into ways that we can stay in touch with you. So website, social media, how do we remain in touch and carry these conversations forward?
It's amazing. Google does a great job. Like now, organically, if you type in the word yeah, but with one T, by the way, and Mark Wolfe, hey, listen, you're on your own if you do it wrong. And you type in yeah, but and Mark Wolfe in Google, we come up on the first page for every rating. So yeah, but book, it's on Amazon. And I actually did physical book, Jeremy. You know why? Some people still want to hold a book and they still want to be able to read it. Yes, it will be coming out in Kindle, etc. But right now, I think there's an excitement about actually having a physical book you can read and show people and give away. And there'll be an audio book read by the author, because as a speaker, it'd be good to hear my voice instead of somebody else's.
Very true.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure in the show notes, you'll have plenty of information, and we'll be promoting this as well, because we're huge supporters. Again, since you've come here in Nashville with City Current, we've invited people, and we love what you guys are doing. Your outreach and what you consistently do and how you care on people is so authentic. And I want to thank you again, not just because I'm on your podcast, but for what you guys do.
I appreciate that. Well, it takes a team, it takes a community to power the good. So thank you. Marc A. Wolfe, president and founder of Marc A. Wolfe Enterprises. You can also go to marcawolfe.com, and that's MarcAWolfe.com. So Marc, thank you for all you do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the City Current Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.